Good morning. If we haven't met yet, my name's John Ackerman. I have the privilege of being the director of Freedom Ministry, Spiritual Development, and Men's Ministry here at CFC. And first and foremost, let me just say, Happy Father's Day. To all of the dads, stepdads, I hope you saw the video that we opened with. That was a really fantastic and touching tribute to all that's involved in Father's Day. And so happy Father's Day to all of you that are doing the work of fathering in whatever capacity that looks like. And I think one of the interesting things that all fathers could agree, in whichever way you found yourself fulfilling that role, how quickly you find out just how much more there is. How quickly you find out there's a lot more than I was expecting. There was a lot more that I didn't know how to do, that I was going to have to do, that I was going to get to do. There's more to being a dad, I think, than anyone told you when you got started. And so happy Father's Day to all of you that are doing the work of discovering just how much more there is. You're going to find out the theme of There's More is the theme for today, because for all of those that were just baptized, congratulations, there's more. Right? And anybody that's been on this journey now for a little bit knows that reality in the spiritual life. There's more. There's more we get to experience. There's more we get to do. There's more it sometimes feels like we have to do. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today too. And I also want to say, because this is the weekend where we commemorate as a nation Juneteenth. And honestly, I have come to truly appreciate this national recognition because as we're also about to celebrate in just a couple of weeks, our nation's birthday. And for any of you that know me, you know that my background was actually in history, and I promise this is not going to be a sermon that turns into a history lesson. But give me a moment. Right, we're about to celebrate 250 years of our nation deciding we want to see what happens when we pursue this experiment called freedom and liberty. We want to see what happens when we decide that the people can be free. And 88 years after that decision was made as a nation, we concluded not the first war of independence, but a second war where as a nation, the people decided not only what freedom was going to mean, but who it was going to be for. And that's what we've celebrated this weekend. Not just what freedom means, but who it gets to be for. And the thing that we get to celebrate is it's for everyone. And when we talk about freedom, what we mean is there's more. There's more that we get to experience as people, as citizens, as participants in this national experience. There's more. And it reminds me, actually, this holiday, probably more than any other, reminds me of the trueness, the truth of the spiritual life with God. There's actually a quote by a guy named Richard Rohr that I have on my wall in my office because I'm so captivated by it. He said there's two basic invitations, there's two basic calls to God's people throughout the scriptures. And the first is the call that goes something like this. It's the call to let those who are enslaved know that they can be free. And it's the call of God through Moses to his people, saying, let me show you what freedom looks like. Let me lead you out of bondage and captivity into a land that I will show you, into a land that I have promised you. Let me show you what it would mean to no longer be slaves, but to be free. But there is a second call from the scriptures that in some ways is the call that we are all still responding to today. And it's this. It's the call of Jesus to those who think they're already free. That there is, in fact, still a deeper bondage, a deeper enslavement that we have all been subjected to, and he himself has come to give us true freedom, true liberty, to set the captives free. Because there's more. If you've been with us over the last few weeks, we've started our summer series, this journey through Proverbs, the book of wisdom, found right about in the middle of the scriptures. And for those that like to follow along on your physical or digital device, go ahead and sort of split the difference in your Bible if you've got the physical one, otherwise just click tap, 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 tap. We're going to Proverbs chapter 4, verse 18. And while you're getting there, I want to, again, old classroom teacher habit. You can't teach something new without recapping what was already taught. It's in there. It's in there. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Brian kicked us off with the first chapter in Proverbs, specifically verse 7, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, that as we want to step into this life of more that God offers us, there is a recognition of who he is and how he is that is pivotal, that is central to living this life with him. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And then last week, we went to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, and we were reminded of the reality that we are called to, we are invited to, we get to trust in the Lord with all our heart, lean not on our own understanding. In all our ways acknowledge him, and he will make our paths straight. Today we come to Proverbs chapter 4, verse 18, and we're going to tie all three of these together during our time here. So Proverbs 4, chapter 18, says, "The way of the righteous is like the first gleam of dawn, which shines ever brighter until the full light of day." Now, full disclosure, when Pastor Brian asked me to give a message, and he told me it was going to be on one of the Proverbs, and he told me it was going to be on this one, I know I've read Proverbs cover to cover, however many, I could not remember ever encountering this proverb. It's like, seriously, like this is what you're getting, like of all the Proverbs, you're giving me this one. Nobody knows this one. Nobody knows this one. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about sunrises, we're going to talk about perfect pictures. What are we going to talk about here? And then what I realized is this is going to be dangerous because this is my soapbox. Yeah. This is my soapbox because when I look at this verse, that the way of the righteous is like the first gleam of dawn, which shines ever brighter until the full light of day, what I see first and foremost is the reminder, there's more. And friends, there's more is my soapbox, so buckle up. We're going to be here a bit. Before we talk about this proverb, though, I want to go back even further and recap where we've gone these last several months. I want to take us all the way back to our Easter series. The resurrection rewrites our story. And Pastor Brian reminded us as we were preparing for this Easter season, as we were commemorating the incredible sacrifice that our Lord Jesus made for all humanity to set us free, and then was raised to life again as the first of many. We were reminded this is not just a moment to celebrate once a year on Easter, but this is the reality that we now live from. The reality that we now live from is that Jesus' resurrection rewrites our story. We are now living in a new story than the one that we used to live in. We now live from a new identity, no longer the one that we were born into. We get to now live from a new power source, God himself within us. And we now get to live with new hope. The hope that all things will be made new. The hope that there is life and life abundant. The certainty of hope that this story ends well. And in fact, we're invited to not just know that that's the case, but we're invited to now live from this story and to discover just how much more is in this story that we get to live than we ever realized. And so as we come to this book of Proverbs, and as we spend this summer in the book of Proverbs, I know that sometimes we're tempted to look at the book of Proverbs as truisms, good advice to live by, sound strategy when you're not sure what else to do. And there is a reality to that. That's part of the benefit of wisdom literature. It's good advice. But the other important thing for us to remember is that it's good advice from people who discovered why it's good advice. This isn't abstract good advice. This is hard-earned wisdom from those who lived through the reality that birthed this wisdom. We are not just meant to live from the answers that other people give us. Again, I'm having teacher flashbacks, right? Just how often my students would say, is this going to be on the test? In other words, is this the answer? I don't actually care about the context, Mr. Ackerman. I don't really care why it matters or what happened around it before, after, anyway. Just, is this the answer I need to memorize and regurgitate when prompted so I can move on with my day? Proverbs is not that. Proverbs is not a series of answers to the test. Proverbs is the wisdom that was discovered by those who lived the fullness of the story and are trying to help us discover how much more is available in ours. Their context, their wisdom has to become our own. Not just the answer, the context. Maturity, spiritual maturity, requires context, not just answers. And so please, 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 if I accomplish nothing else today, please don't look at the book of Proverbs like it's answers to the test. Look at it as the hard-fought and heart-won wisdom of those who have gone before, who have lived the fullness of the story with God and have said, this will help you understand the story so that you can live it. Again, our proverb for today, the way of the righteous is like the first gleam of dawn. The way of the righteous, not the answers of the righteous, not the information of the righteous, the way of the righteous, the way to live, the way to experience this life with God is like the first gleam of dawn. It's the beginning of something that we get to progress further and further into and experience more and more deeply, not just get the answer so we can move on with our day. By the way, we're not exempt from this as adults. I know we all just laughed about the teenagers about, just give me the answer so I can move on with my day. Adults are like this too. How many of you have had the thing happening at your house for however many hours, days, weeks, months that you were trying to fix, trying to repair? And you finally called it quits, and you finally called the expert, and they finally came, and they diagnosed the problem in about 5 minutes, and they fixed it in about 30, and you watched them do it, and you went, I could have done that. In some ways, we're no different than the teenagers. Somebody could have just told me to do that, and I could have done that, and I could have saved however much money. But knowing the what doesn't work without knowing the way. Knowing the answer without the context is actually unhelpful. Yes, If the technician would have come over and stood over your shoulder and said, do this and then do this and then do this, why? Don't ask why, just do it. That would have been great, especially if they wouldn't have charged you for it because you did the work. Right? But the what matters. The answer matters, but the answer requires context. Maturity requires context. Home repairs require context. Fixing a car requires context. Fixing anything, including the reality of my life, requires context. Not just answers. There are some really important whats. There are some really important answers. There are some really good things to do in this life with God. A couple of weeks ago, Pastor Brian and I stood up here and we talked about the class that we have called Square One. By the way, thank you. You all responded beautifully. There are about 40 people upstairs right now in week 3 of that class. We've never had 40 people show up at once. So I'd say thank you, but I can't thank you because they're all upstairs. So thank you to them. You guys killed it. But thank you to all of you that were here and listened and heard our invitation to come and discover just how much more is available in this life with God that we introduced through that class. But we also talked about a second class that we offer here called Rooted. And in the class that we have called Rooted, you're going to learn more about the 7 spiritual rhythms that we have based all spiritual growth at this church on. And again, some have heard that class as, well, it's probably for new believers, or it's probably for baby Christians, or it's probably for people new to the church. No, it's actually for all of us. Because it's not just a what to learn. These are the 7 rhythms: daily devotion and prayer and freedom from strongholds and sacrificial generosity and serving the community and sharing your story and celebration. It's not just a what, it's a way. How do I live in those rhythms? How do I live in those rhythms today? How do I live in those rhythms next week, in a year from now, in 10 years from now? What does it look like to grow in those rhythms and discover just how much more there is? Another teacher moment just for a second. Friends, our classes here are not like the classes you took in school, which, by the way, the classes you took in school weren't like this either. Classes are not designed to give you information so you can retain it, so you can be tested on it, so you can forget it just in time to move the tassel and call it a year. It is to help you learn a way of thinking, a way of living, a way of navigating this life. Our classes here are no different. We don't invite you into reading the Bible for life and following God's voice and studying the scriptures for growth, living on mission, money. We don't invite you into those things to check the box on content. There's some important whats, but the way of the righteous is like the first gleam of dawn. There's a beginning and then there's more. And when you come back to those things, you begin to discover just how much more there is. By the way, all of this is bonus today. We haven't even gotten into the meat of what we're talking about. Except the heart is this. This is the way you are invited to live your life with God. Not just acquire content, but learn to live with Him. I actually want to jump back to Pastor Brian's proverb from 2 weeks ago. That makes it sound like it was his proverb. That's not his. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, informationally, that's helpful. But practically, pragmatically, if we don't understand the what, we're going to get a distorted way. If we hear fear of the Lord and we think cowering and trembling and hiding, don't make Dad mad. Otherwise, when he gets home, you know what. If that's how we understand the what of that wisdom, our way isn't going to work. At least not in the way that God wants. And so if you hear 2 weeks ago, you heard Pastor Brian remind us that fear of the Lord better translates from its original language into modern English as awe and wonder. Fear of the Lord better translates in our context today as awe and wonder. So let me take you all back to math class just for a second. Not enough to start trembling and shaking, but just for a second. You remember the whole idea of a proof? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C? Okay, so if fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and fear of the Lord is equal to awe and wonder, then awe and wonder is the beginning of wisdom. Let that sink in for just a second. Awe and wonder of God is actually the beginning of wisdom. I don't know about you, does that hit different? Because it hits different for me. Awe and wonder of God is the beginning of wisdom. Which means if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Wisdom is an invitation into awe and wonder with God. Wisdom is an invitation into awe and wonder with God. That is part of the way of the righteous. We get to discover just how much more is available to us in this life with God. It's like the first gleam of dawn. It's not immediately apparent what all is going to take place, how it's going to unfold. There's more coming. It takes time. The way of the righteous starts with some important answers to questions. It starts with some important things to do. But as dawn progresses and the sky illuminates, you start to see just how much more is there. If you've ever been out for the sunrise and you see the first light come up and it starts to illuminate things, and then the day gets brighter, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot out here. This is the way of life with God. And I know sometimes we even hear that and we go, yeah, I know, it starts off pretty simple. I start my life with God and I go, all right, there's just a few things that I probably need to do. I probably just need to do some stuff like read my Bible. I should probably pray. I should probably go serve someplace. And that's it, right? And then the longer you're around, you're like, oh, they want more of me. They expect, so they want me to start giving even more stuff and giving even more time. And don't they know how busy I am? But all right, God, I want to give you more stuff. And I should probably spend even more time reading my Bible. And I should probably spend even more time praying because now I know more people and I know how jacked up their lives are. So I really need to be praying for all. There's just more to do. But the invitation to an even greater life with God isn't just about doing more. It's not about productivity. It's not about efficiency. That's not the way of the righteous. The way of the righteous isn't busyness. Revelation chapter 3, Jesus makes this incredible invitation. He says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And he says it to believers. It's not an evangelistic verse. It's a verse to believers. Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you'll invite me in, we'll have a meal as good friends. The answer to the question is not do more in this life with God. Rather, the way of the righteous is invite him further and further in. And you can't do it till you start. You can't do it till you start with a moment like what we just witnessed, a moment of baptism that says, Jesus, I have accepted you into my heart as Lord and Savior, and I'm saying yes to you publicly. Everybody else is going to know too. I want more. The way of the righteous is constantly inviting Jesus further and further in. It's not about you do more and more and more. It's you invite him further and further in. He's the light. He is the first light of dawn that grows brighter and brighter till it illuminates everything. And yet I think also, if we're being honest, there's a part of us that feels like there is a hard cap in this spiritual life with God. This is World Cup time. This is the time where we get to find out how many of you have been soccer or football fans your whole life and how many of you are just jumping on because it's super fun to see the whole world rally around something. We do it for the Olympics. We do it for World Cup. It's a blast. And I was this close to playing in the World Cup. I don't know if you know that about me. I had a little bit of a background as an athlete. I was this close. And by this close, I mean I played Little League soccer when I was 6. Happy feet soccer. That was amoeba soccer, right? That's when everybody just follows the ball wherever the ball is, right? There's no strategy, there's no offense, there's no defense. There is barely a goalkeeper because sometimes the goalkeeper leaves the goal to go follow the ball around. I was this close. Could have gone pro. But we watch World Cup soccer and we see the most beautiful game. And it's stunning. It's stunning to see what people that have dedicated their life to something are able to accomplish, particularly together. I feel like somebody should do a sermon series about how much better it is for us to play together as a team than try to go at it individually. We could probably call it we over me or something like that. I don't know. That'd be good. Right, but there's something about this spiritual life that I think often feels like our version of, man, I was this close to making the World Cup team. I played Little League. And then I realized soccer's not my sport. My feet are not that coordinated. Friends, that is not the reality of the spiritual life. The spiritual life does not have levels and tiers based on natural ability and performance. But I do want to remind you of something that Pastor Brian said back in that We Over Me series. In week 3, he talked to us about spiritual growth, maturity. And he said this, and it's pretty disruptive, but it's also true. That spiritual maturity isn't about how long you've been on the journey. It's not about time served. It's about the choices you make on the journey. The way of the righteous is not about how long you've been on the journey. It's about the choices you make on the journey. And so unlike my potential World Cup future, which is clearly non-existent, the only thing preventing me from going further in my spiritual life with God are the choices I make. Not natural ability, not talent, not intellect, choice. And the same is true for all of us. There is no barrier. There is no barrier to your journey with God other than your choices. There is no natural qualifier or disqualifier. This is not based on talent, skill, intellect, height, weight, age, location. There is no barrier to your journey with God other than your choices. And I know some of you just heard that, and you just heard that with like a sledgehammer's worth of conviction and condemnation. And that's not the goal today. The goal today is not to beat you up and tell you how much you're falling short and how much more you should be doing. Because I just said a minute ago, that's not about that. It's not about how much you're doing and that you should be doing more. In fact, since the earliest days of Christianity, as those that have gone before us and have earned the hard-fought wisdom have described, there is a progression in the Christian life that very quickly has less and less to do with just doing and productivity and efficiency. There are some things to do. There is an outer life in this life with God. Basic obedience. God says you should do something, you should probably do it. Reading the scriptures, it's helpful. There are some behaviors that are going to need to change. we do need to learn to pray and not just learn how to ask, though, by the way, asking is critically important. Maybe another time I'll get up here and talk to you about just how much our hearts were made to come alive and share our desires with our Heavenly Father who placed them in us. But we are also called to learn how to hear our Father communicate with us. That's the basic outer life of the Christian way. There are some things to do. But since the beginning of Christianity, the other thing that we've discovered is that the invitation is not just to do more and more and more in the outer life. The invitation is to invite him in. There is an inner life with God. There is an inner life with God that involves deep surrender in the inmost places. Not my will, Lord, but yours be done. The renovation of the heart, the restoration of my inner being, my inner man, your inner woman, your inner person, the you that lives on the inside that the scriptures talk about so much, and learning to live with a genuine holiness from within, not because we're striving white-knuckled on the outside, but it's because it's who we've become on the inside, and experiencing genuine intimacy with God. For the last 2,000 years of the Christian tradition, this has been the known way of the righteous that ultimately leads us not just through an outer life and not just into an inner life, but into a united life. A united life with God, where we experience deep, ongoing intimacy and friendship with God. A fully surrendered life, where we learn to abide with God. Friends, this is the journey. This is the way of the righteous. And notice how much those aren't answers to questions on the test. That is a context that requires experience, that requires maturity, that requires, honestly, confusion. It requires confusion, it requires frustration, it requires, God, what are you doing? But come closer. I'd love to understand, but even more than understanding, I want more of you. And there are some things that get in the way. Some of this is just going to take some practice and some learning. Anybody that's learned a new language, learned a new instrument, learned to go beyond happy feet soccer as a 7-year-old, knew that there was some stuff that was beneficial to learn. But what we also are required to navigate on this way of the righteous is some of the stuff that got in and now gets in the way. The places of pain, of loss, of disappointment, of confusion. The places where I thought I had it all figured out and then my world got rocked. Or the places where I didn't realize my world got locked till months, years, decades later, and now I'm finally looking back and going, oh. But the way out is not just to learn more content, it's to invite him in. To invite him in. Love the Lord your God with how much of your heart, soul, mind, and strength? It's like proportional, right? Yeah, all, yeah. All. Does anyone feel like they're there? All? God, you have all of my heart. You have all of my mind, my will, my strength. You have all of my life. I am not. I'm not there yet. But that's the invitation. That's the way of the righteous. In all your ways, acknowledge him. I'm not there yet, but that's the way. And that doesn't come from productivity and efficiency, and it certainly doesn't come from more content. It comes from regularly accepting that invitation in the inner life and in the united life. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say this about us collectively. Most of the people, myself included, most of the people in this room are not mature yet. But that word yet at the end matters. Most of the people in this room are not mature yet. And if you heard yet as condemnation and conviction and you're not doing enough and you should be trying harder, that's not the invitation. Yet is an invitation. Yet is the same invitation that Jesus gives us in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Will you invite me in? Would you like? Notice how often Jesus asks disruptive questions that on the surface are obvious, but it exposes something in us. He walks up to someone that can't see or can't walk, and he says, would you like to get well? And it feels like it's one of those moments where you need to put your arm around Jesus and lead him a couple steps away and be like, dude, of course they do. Of course they do. Of course they want to get well. Why don't you just do it? Why you gotta make it awkward, Jesus? But when Jesus asks questions like that, it's designed to get past our outer certainty of information and get to our inner place of confusion and heartache and uncertainty. What do I actually want? Do I want to be fully surrendered? Do I want to be fully united? Do I want to go through the process of healing and restoration and transformation? Do I really want that? And sometimes the challenge is we don't actually know what it would look like. Another fun childhood moment for me. I think this was second or third grade. I am of the generation that does not have my whole life captured on video or picture, and it's the poorer for it, I think, because now I have to rely on my memory. But it was absolutely elementary school. And in elementary school, there was a moment where the high school show choir came to the elementary school and they put on a performance. And I was in the elementary school choir, which is a pretty elite place to be. It's right there, like I was this close to the World Cup, right? Little League soccer and elementary choir. Like I was going places. And I watched that high school show choir step onto stage in all the sparkles and do things no one had told me people could do. I didn't know people could make those sounds. I didn't know people could move like that while making those sounds. It was captivating. And so I pursued it because someone else had shown me a way that I wasn't aware of. There is no barrier to your journey with God other than our choices. We get to choose to pursue or not. There is no cap, there is no limitation for skill or ability, height or weight or age or location. Will we choose? And so as we close today, I know for many of you that have been here a while, you hear Pastor Brian finish with Ephesians 3:20. To him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask for or imagine, according to his power that's at work within us. I want to take you back a couple of verses in Ephesians 3, and I want to pray this over you, because this is the invitation. Paul writes, "For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name." That means all of us. "I ask that out of the riches of his glory, he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. Then you, being rooted and grounded in love, will have power, together with all the saints, to comprehend the length and width and height and depth of the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God." And so, God, where are you inviting me to know you better today? To experience more of you today? God, where are you inviting me to set aside the things that are creating space between us? Where are you inviting me to set aside the things that are preventing me from seeing you clearly? Where are you inviting me to set aside the things that are keeping me from seeing myself the way that you do? God, where are you inviting me to move through the outer life to the inner life with you? And God, where are you inviting me to move through the inner life to a united life with you? God, whatever it is, wherever it is, show me the way. Show me the way of the righteous so that I may walk in it. It may feel like it's just beginning, just the first glimpse of dawn. But God, I know there's more. And that's what I want. All of you. So that you can have all of me. This is my prayer, Jesus, in your name, for myself and for all of us.